In the absolute stillness of the Antarctic winter, there is a silence so profound it feels heavy. For months, the continent is shrouded in a darkness that defies the human spirit. A place where temperatures drop low enough to turn breath into ice before it even leaves the lungs. We have long viewed this frozen wasteland as a volta-static, impenetrable fortress of ice that preserves the balance of our world. We trust that the ice is solid. We trust that the barrier between the freezing atmosphere and the churning ocean remains closed. But that trust is an illusion. In the winter of 2017, the fortress was breached. Deep within the ice pack of the Weddell Sea, over a submerged mountain known as the Dryas, a void opened. It was not a small crack or a minor fissure. It was a terrifying expanse of open water, a dark, gaping wound in the white skin of the planet that eventually grew to 80,000 square kilometers. To put that into perspective, an area the size of Switzerland simply vanished, replaced by a bottomless black abyss. Scientists call this phenomenon apolynia, but that clinical term fails to capture the existential dread of what this hole actually represents. It is not just a gap in the ice. It is a failure of the Earth's thermal shield. It is a leak in the planetary engine. And most disturbingly, it is a sign that the deep oceanic cold, dark world that has been hidden for millennia is starting to rise, and it is bringing a devastating heat with it. Today, we peel back the layers of the Antarctic void to expose a discovery that challenges our survival. Welcome to Discovered. To understand the danger of the Dryas polynya, one must first understand the fragile physics of the Southern Ocean. In the Antarctic, the ocean is layered like a graveyard. On the surface, there is a thin layer of cold, relatively fresh water. Beneath it lies a much deeper, much larger body of water, the circumpolar deep water. This deep layer is warmer and significantly saltier. Under normal conditions, these two layers do not mix. The cold surface layer acts as a lid, keeping the warmth of the deep ocean trapped where it cannot reach the ice. But the Dryas is a geographical anomaly, a massive underwater plateau that rises from the seafloor. As the great currents of the Southern Ocean strike this mountain, they are forced upward, creating a turbulent churning. In 2017, a series of violent extratropical storms acted as the final catalyst. These were not merely winds, they were atmospheric tantrums that triggered a process known as Ekman transport. The wind did not just push the water, it twisted it. It dragged the cold surface layer away and forced the warm, salty heart of the deep ocean to the surface. As this warm water rose, it melted the ice from below with a ferocity that no atmospheric temperature could match. The lid was blown off. The heat that had been sequestered for centuries was suddenly exhaled into the freezing air. This was the birth of the void, a self-sustaining cycle of destruction where the rising heat prevented new ice from forming, keeping the wound open even in the dead of the polar night. The implications of this void are not localized to the Antarctic. They are catastrophic for the entire global climate system. We must look at what scientists call the global conveyor belt, or the thermoline circulation. This is the circulatory system of our planet. It is a massive interconnected web of currents that moves heat, salt, and nutrients from the equator to the poles and back again. It is what keeps Europe from freezing into a tundra and what prevents the tropics from becoming an unlivable furnace. Antarctica is the heart of this system. It is where cold, dense, salty water sinks to the bottom of the ocean, driving the entire global current. But when a giant hole like the Dryas polynya opens, it disrupts this delicate balance. The massive release of heat into the atmosphere and the mixing of water layers change the density of the ocean. If the water stops sinking in the Antarctic, the heart stops beating. We are talking about a total collapse of ocean circulation, a scenario that would trigger a sudden, violent shift in global weather patterns that could last for centuries. But there is a darker, more immediate threat rising from the void: the release of ancient carbon. The Southern Ocean is the planet's greatest carbon sink. It has spent decades absorbing the carbon dioxide we have pumped into the atmosphere, hiding it in the cold, pressurized depths. But a polynya is a chimney. When the deep water rises to the surface in these gaps, it doesn't just bring heat. It brings all that stored CO2. As the void opens, the ocean breathes out. It releases massive quantities of greenhouse gases back into the atmosphere, creating a lethal feedback loop. More CO2 leads to more warming. More warming leads to more storms. More storms create more polynya. We are witnessing a tipping point where the Earth stops trying to mitigate our damage and starts accelerating its own transformation into something hostile to human life. We must consider the psychological toll of this discovery. For decades, we have treated climate change as a linear problem, a slow rise in temperature that we could eventually adapt to, but the Antarctic virages prove that the Earth does not always change slowly. It changes in sudden, violent leaps. The opening of the Dryas polynya was a nonlinear event, a black swan of geology that caught the scientific community off guard. It serves as a grim reminder of our own ignorance. We are living on a planet whose internal mechanisms we are only beginning to understand, and we are poking at those mechanisms with industrial-scale force. We view the ice as a constant, but it is a variable one that is rapidly moving towards zero. The psychological normalcy bias tells us that because the world was stable yesterday, it will be stable tomorrow. But the void in the Weddell Sea is a scream from the planet, a warning that the foundations are crumbling. History provides us with terrifying precedents. We can look back at the younger Dryas period, roughly 12,000 years ago. when a sudden influx of fresh water into the ocean triggered a collapse of the conveyor belt. Within a single decade, temperatures in parts of the northern hemisphere plummeted by 10 degrees Celsius. Civilizations that were just beginning to flourish were wiped out or forced into brutal migration. The Dryas is the modern echo of that ancient catastrophe. It is the first crack in the dam. If these holes continue to open, and the data suggests they will, as the Southern Ocean continues to absorb unprecedented levels of heat, we are looking at the end of the Holocene. This is the era of stability that allowed human agriculture and cities to thrive. We are entering the Anthropocene, an era defined by volatility and the loss of the known. The opening of these Antarctic abysses is not just a geological curiosity, it is a breach of the planetary hull. Every square kilometer of open water in the winter ice pack represents a failure of our life support system. It represents heat that should be trapped being unleashed, and carbon that should be buried being exhaled. We are witnessing the Earth setting off its final alarm clock. This discovery is not a call for mild concern, it is a report on a systemic failure. The Dryas is a ghost that haunts the Southern Ocean, a reminder that even in the most remote corners of the globe, the consequences of our actions are manifesting in terrifying ways. The abyss is no longer hidden. It is here, it is open, and it is breathing. We must ask ourselves if we are prepared for a world where the oceans no longer follow the rules we have written for them. We are entering an age where the ground door, the ice beneath our feet, can no longer be trusted. The void is a mirror, reflecting our own fragility back at us. It is a silent witness to a planet in transition. A transition that does not include the comfort or safety of the human species. Geology operates on a scale of eons, but the catastrophic events that define those eons take only seconds in comparison. The opening of the Dryas took only days to reach its peak, but its effects will be felt for generations. We are living through a moment of geological transition that our ancestors could never have imagined, and we are doing so with our eyes closed. The heat is rising. The lid is off. The abyss is looking back at us. We are no longer the masters of this planet. We are merely passengers on a vessel whose engine is failing. Sleep well, knowing that the world you woke up in is not the same world you will leave behind. The floor is thinner than you think. The end is beneath you. If you are prepared to face the truths that the world chooses to ignore, stay with us. There are many more anomalies waiting to be unburied, and many more secrets the Earth is beginning to reveal. Subscribe to Discovered and activate the notification bell. In a world of comfortable lies and scientific denial, we provide the cold, clinical evidence of reality. Do not miss our next investigation, where we will dive deeper into the fractures of our failing world. See you in the next investigation.